Hey folks, it's Bear Gardner, and we are here with another edition of Cards Special Operations Executive, and it is time for the rotation for the newly announced winter expansion Homefront, and because this rotation is a little impactful in places, I thought I might grab some people whose faces you might recognise, lock them in the Cards SOE bunker until such time as we're done recording, and force them to give your opinions. And as it turns out, I'm lucky enough to know some fairly smart people. So, sitting down below on the screen beneath the shiny Homefront thing, we have Core. Core, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction to all of the folks watching?
Hey guys, I'm CoreData. As some of you may know, I make some content related to cards, occasionally doing deck techs and gameplay videos, as well as occasionally streaming over on Twitch. I'm relatively new in comparison to my two co-hosts here. Only been playing for what 7-ish months, but I like to think I have a relatively good understanding of the game. So hopefully I can give some insights. But I I don't know if I'm the most qualified person in this call.
That's okay, because on the subject of qualified people, I've also managed to grab JKing7. JKing, why don't you tell people who you are if they don't already know?
All right, I'm JKing7. I also do cards, YouTube, and occasionally Twitch. And I mainly focus on the competitive aspect of the game. So this is talking about decks and the best deck in the game and how to play them well as covering news that particularly affects people who play the game a lot. So news about balance, news about rotation, and news about tournaments and whatnot. And I've been playing the game for 6.5 years, so I've been around the block here.
Which is interesting, because that means in the 6.5 years that you've done it, you've won exactly 50% of the World Championships, which you will never say yourself because you're far too humble. But JKing is indeed the threepeat Kards World Champion, and generally accepted by most top players to be one of, if not the best player that we have seen in the game. I'll say it because he's far too nice to do so. Guys, I am super, super grateful for you coming along and being part of this. It's going to make my life a little bit easier. In the interests of not taking too much of the poor human beings watching this time, I say too much because if you guys know us, we can all talk. If you check out the links down below, there are links to everyone's channels. Please go follow, like, and interact with everyone involved in this. I cannot stress enough at the moment how much the YouTube algorithm is being an absolute arse. And the more that you interact, the more that you engage with it, the more chance you're giving channels in a relatively small and niche world being made by passionate people a chance to actually grow. And it's kind of key at the moment because they've had a fiddle with the algorithms and it really does feed off interaction. So make sure you go and like these guys, catch them, and obviously get on board if they're ever streaming. They're always worth a one. Plus, if one of us is streaming, one or other of the rest of us is probably there because we sort of end up lurking in this weird Ouroboros circle of each other's content. Right, so moving on to a nation which perhaps one could argue hasn't been struggling recently. We arrive at Germany. So returning German cards, we have Joint Operation. So Joint Operation is 2-cost limited order. And it says deal damage to target unit equal to 1 plus the number of unit types you control. So this is a classic combined arms card. It really wants you to have a varied deck with board presence so that you can use this as a theoretically. I mean, this could theoretically be a 4 or 5 point removal ping. I say theoretically because the thing about it is it's also a 2-cost order that's kind of sat in your hand while you're doing it. And obviously it can only target units, although I do believe that hasn't always been the case. JKing and I may in fact have talked about that on a different video. But yeah, this is an interesting one coming back. JKing, thoughts?
I Every time I look at this card, I'm like, man, in theory, this card should be like much better than it actually is, but in practice, it's not that good. If 1939 wanted to be like truly chaotic evil, they could undo the nerf and let this go into the HQ again. But I don't think they're that sadistic.
Yeah, please don't. Core, what about you?
Yeah, I'm unsurprised to see this come back because they did, and actually same goes for like the BF-109 we're going to see at the end of this. I'm unsurprised to see both these cards returning because they did cite for the Semivente buff that they wanted to push like Italy towards like a combined arms ally. So I was expecting combined arms stuff to be coming.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that joint operation at 2 is a bit too expensive. I wouldn't mind seeing it like at 1 credit, just 1k, because it's on average going to deal like 3 damage. So you're looking at like an air superiority that like needs a little bit of extra work,
Yeah.
more or less. So yeah, I mean it's fine. It's gonna potentially help the combined arms deck if it does go to like 1 credit. Other than that, I don't know why you'd run this over like breakthrough if you're looking for that effect.
Yeah. We shall see. Might get a rework. U48. So this is a special card. This obviously is one of each rarity coming back. The special card coming back this time is U48, 3-cost order. And it says the enemy cannot deploy units next turn. Now, some of you may have become familiar with how potent this effect can be, because we do have an elite that deals some damage to your HQ right now that prevents you from deploying units too. I will say, this effect can be, when you play it well, cripplingly effective. And I'm a little bit personally cautious about this coming back, given that we already have Tirpitz. Also, it is safe to assume, given that it is a U-boat, that it will have the Navy type. Just for those of you keeping score. JKing, do you share my slight misgivings about this being maybe a little bit oppressive?
So this card came out in the Legions. It was in the game for a very long time. People tried it in like very fringe stuff, but it was just never that good because Germany lacked sort of the burn from hand for this to be good. Like for this to be good, you need to be not behind on board, and also ability to kill your opponent. Um, Typically from hand, I suppose it does work if you have full board control and then you play this, and your opponent doesn't have removal for your board without units. But just like the necessary combination of stuff for this to be good really existed from now. So like in its comparison to Tirpitz, I think like the best thing about Tirpitz is it's like 4 damage. It's the equivalent of a Comet attack in combination with they can't deploy units the next turn, and you can either play it on curve like on turn 3 after a War Machine, which sort of just helps out your curve even better because then you get to your like 5 and 6 where you're getting your very powerful units, while your opponent doesn't get a turn 3 basically. Or you play it to stop your opponent from like doing guards. So you do like Comet face Tirpitz, and then they can't play guards, and the next turn you do Comet face again, and it's like all damage guaranteed basically. It also fringe combinations with the FW that deals 4 damage if they didn't play units last turn, which could be relevant in Burn. And I can confirm it is a Navy card. Like it has the Navy tech now in Classic. So yeah, like I could see people maybe playing it in Navy Burn if people are still playing Navy Burn. I don't think it's good enough to run in like a German-US ramp, for example, just because it's not impactful enough, and you really have to rely on the burn.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think if it sees play, it is going to see play in one deck. I personally have some concerns that one deck might be quite good with 2 more turns of doing some damage to HQ from your Marines and getting the prevention. But we shall see. Core, how do you feel about the return of U48?
I wouldn't be surprised if this was going to be one of the reworked cards. Again, like JKing said, this effect it's not that powerful. What makes it powerful with Tirpitz is the chip damage you're getting in. Like if you're playing a tempo deck in Germany, the Tirpitz being burned as well as disrupting your opponent's ability to respond to your board is huge. And as the control deck, the ability to chip your opponent into range of Bismarck is also huge, while also like preventing them from developing an answer or like from pressuring you out on the backtrack. But like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Navy Burn, there's an argument, but I think like 3 is expensive for Navy Burn as well when you think about it, because you're playing Marine Division plus Mikura on turn 5, like turn 6 and 7 you're playing the other copies of Mikura, and then turn 8 or turn 9 you're just production Bismarck for lethal. Like the U-48 doesn't necessarily fit into the curve as like all that well. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just lack vision. But
Uh,
I don't think like the current builds of Navy Burn really want U-48 when you compare it to like U-16, which bounces and draws a card. I think that's much more disruptive in a lot of cases because you're forcing your opponent to burn credits every time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of the reworks.
that is also fair. We do have to bear that possibility in mind. Always nice to have different opinions. Speaking of cards to have opinions on, we have the return of the German elite. This is the FW-190 Jagdbomber. So this is a 5-cost, 2-op-cost, 5/4 fighter, despite the fact that it's called Jagdbomber. Just to be clear for anyone listening, because I know some of my people in particular listen to this kind of like a podcast. It has deployment. Send an enemy ground unit to its owner's hand. Now, in the past, this card has been considered to be really quite good because it is a very strong body on fighter, which is generally accepted to be a very useful body type, and has bounce, which can be a very strong effect. Honestly, I'd be happier to see this coming back if it wasn't German. But that might just be me at the minute, but I don't know. Jagdbomber has had some moments in the past where it can be quite a potent tool, and it's going to depend on what the deck is for me, but I don't know. I've never been the world's biggest fan of this as a sheer power level of a card, but it is definitely worthy of its elite title. Core, you often have thoughts on bounce effects, I know, and the way that Germany can impact your board. How are you feeling about Jagdbomber coming back to the game?
I'm excited to play around with this card because it does have a reputation as someone who wasn't around for it when it was like legal for the most part. I am aware that this card is like insane. I mean, even coming like drawing on Tesla knowledge, we played Belligerent Giant, which was a 7-cost 7/4 that just bounced a unit, and it was like playable for the entire 9-year span of Tesla as one of like the best cards in the game. So like the ability, it's not so much that it's a bounce. It's a bounce with a body. It's such a huge tempo swing. Like if your opponent plays a 5-drop and you immediately Jagdbomber the 5-drop, you've taxed them 5 credits while also like you've skipped their turn while also developing your board. It's just such good tempo. Now it only affects ground units, which I mean isn't all that big of a deal. I mean we're in a metagame right now where there's quite a few aircraft. That might change. But there's always going to be relevant ground targets to bounce, guards, for example. So yeah, this card's going to be very, very powerful. I think a lot of the quote-unquote mid-range decks that are in the metagame currently will probably just drop Hipper and just play Jagdbomber because it does Hipper's job while also developing a body that you can pressure your opponent with. And I think we're going to talk about it shortly, but Germany is losing an aircraft that is relevant, and I think this just slots into that slot pretty easily as a replacement for the card they're losing. So yeah, I'm excited to play around with Jagdbomber, but I am expecting this card to be very tilting at times.
JKing?
Yeah, Jagdbomber is one of the most just like in a vacuum powerful cards in the game. Just the fact that if you play this on curve, it is, and it like especially if you play it on curve and it hits your opponent's 4 or 5 cost ground unit that they spent their entire turn playing, that is back-breaking tempo loss. I think that this might be the single best elite that specifically the German ramp could have asked for back. I don't think this is the best German elite period that they could have got back. Obviously, the aggro decks would have really liked Tube, and all decks really would have liked Frankel. But just in terms of specifically the ramp deck, if you can like do turn 2 War Machine, turn 4 Jagdbomber, and it also is an AoE unit, so it's helping out with like running suppressions. Yeah, absolutely disgusting. I'm also beyond just like being a very good card for one of the best decks in the game. I'm also just very, very sad that we're not getting Lurking Danger back. Lurking Danger is one of my favorite elites, and I don't know why it's been in rotation basically since rotation has existed. I don't know why they haven't brought that card back. It's very simple. It's not game breaking. It's just a real fun little package card to play. But yeah, honestly, my bigger complaint is the lack of Lurking Danger.
I mean, that's
I will
also
say-
fair.
I would say on the side of like elites they could have brought back, I would have been very interested to see like autocannon come back as like an aggressive elite. I think that would have been interesting in the current format because it doesn't help the slower German decks at all, but it does kind of push more aggro stuff. I don't know. I just think autocannon would have been
Yeah.
a neat little comeback.
Yeah, I think certainly it would have been an interesting drop. I will say I've had some moments where I didn't enjoy the existence of autocannon in the game, but yeah, we shall see. But yeah, this is not. I am open about the fact this is not the elite that I would have picked for Germany to return. I think it's helping out a deck that doesn't need help, and yes, the deck might take some hits, but I think you summed it up quite well, Core. This does kind of fit a slot that we may talk about in a little bit. Now, here's a card that I am personally very excited to have back, if only because I have history with recommending this to new players on a regular basis. This is the returning standard card. This is the BF109E7 Trop. This is a German 4-cost, 2-op cost, 3/3 fighter. And it has deployment +1/+1 if you control a tank or infantry, and +3/+3 if you control both. Is this card going to be massively meta-defining? I don't know. Possibly not. Depends on how good Combined Arms is. But this card has always been a good, solid, standard card, even if you're not running a full set of them for new players. Because if you're running a Combined Arms deck, which is quite a good new player-friendly deck, especially if it's German main, there is great value to have on this, and I'm mostly getting this out of the way because there will be other opinions to be had on this card, and I think the competitive opinion might strongly differ from the new player experience opinion. I personally welcome this and Combined Arms in general coming back because it's going to give me a deck that I can advise newer players to learn the game on Germany that doesn't rely on ramp or credit sheet or a bunch of other weird things that I've been having to advise for longer. Plus, I'm sorry, the art's also pretty cool. Let's start with JKing. Thoughts on the return of the Trop?
Very interesting card. That it's seen very fringe play in meta decks over the years. Just because it is so easy to fit into a number of decks, because it doesn't require bombers or artillery or like other combined arms. So it's really just tank or infantry, and a lot of decks run a decent number of tanks and infantries, and a lot of those decks run German ally. At least they have historically. So Trop was like sometimes included in Jagdbomber because you run cavalry on 1, 35T on turn 2, and then on turn 4 you play Trop, and it's a 6/6 that can crush your face. Or you played in frontline because you run like the Chocolate Boys and Greyhounds and Sherbans and M10s and whatnot. Now, obviously, those have been in the past where cards were much weaker, so I don't think it's going to have like any substantial meta impact. But as you said, it's a very good card for newer players, and it's like not a terrible card to test out as like a whatever, if you will, in a couple different decks.
Cool. What about you? I know you, like me, are definitely a fellow lover of the mid-range archetypes. Are you planning on having some builds that might include this card?
Yeah, as a Heinz and a Combined Arms lover, I am excited to test this card out. It's not going to be like impactful in the metagame, I don't think. I think JKing's correct on saying like maybe as a one of in certain decks, But for me, like, as someone who really wants to do more testing with Germany, Finland combined arms, specifically combined arms, not necessarily just Heinz, I think this is going to be like a pretty neat little card to run with.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the standard thick spider that we wanted to come back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
This is the guy that comes to the party that nobody objects to seeing, and then buys everyone a drink. Moving to German cards, which are sadly, not sadly, celebratorily, depending on your point of view, leaving us. We are going to open up, and we're not going to open up small. This is Alpenfestung. I am going to assume that it is highly unlikely that people watching this or listening to this are not familiar with the card, but we'll cover it for the sake of it. Alpenfestung is a German 7-cost elite order, and it says set your HQ defense to 25, remove the top 10 cards of your deck. Now, this card has a history with two of us from when it first came out and was reviewed by us, and we both said very similar things about it. Which is, this is a weird card in that, on the one hand, it is objectively pretty awful in principle, because you're paying 7 to buy yourself some time, and losing 10 cards from your deck and all of that stuff. However, I believe we both also pointed out that there are going to be times when you need to survive, and this by both of us. For those who don't know, I am talking about myself and JKing. This is we both had views on this. When it is good, it's going to be insanely good, and you're not, and we've both said this, you're not going to care about the 10 cards, because they are likely to be 10 cards you weren't going to see anywhere. It's no different than a card you don't draw, or a card that you discard, and when it first came out, so many people were like, this is terrible because we lose 10 cards, and I know we both tried to explain that most of the time, if you're playing this card, it doesn't matter, because either you need it, and it's your only option, at which point it's insane, or you don't need it, and it's occupied a slot in your deck, and yes, you might feel bad, but it is one card. And then I think I know JKing too both said there's going to come a point at which this card will probably become valid for a reason, and we are living in that time. This is one of the most potent and effective cards in the game right now for one of the most potent and effective nations in the game right now, because it's heal when there isn't any. And I'm sorry, this is a celebration for me. There are a number of cards that are leaving us from Germany that I'm celebrating, and this is one of them. I am happy to see it go, because in the current meta, please quote me on that if you're about to start atting me in the comments. In the current meta, this card is borderline toxic. That doesn't mean this card is amazing or this card is good or any of the other things that I've said about it, but is currently problematic. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox for a bit. I did warn you that there were going to be cards that would get me loud. Let's see if we can space this out a little bit. We're going to go to Core before we go to JKing, because I know the two of us can occasionally be quite opinionated. Core, what do you think about the removal of Alpenfestung?
I'm so glad this card is gone. Oh my god, this last metagame, like naval warfare with Alpenfestung, has been miserable. And the two big cards in Germany that have caused this entire metagame to be miserable are Crossfire and Alpenfestung, and the fact that they are played together all the time. Because I'm going to keep banging the Crossfire drum because I'm so tired of Crossfire. But like, a lot of the reason we're in the metagame we're in currently, where a lot of the decks are these hyper high roll aggro decks, is because they're decks that, like, to beat Germany as an aggro deck, you have to get under a Crossfire and you have to get under Alpenfestung, because both just win the game by themselves. So Alpenfestung is a card I am very happy to see go. I mean, JKing is also probably familiar with Reno Jackson from Hearthstone. It is basically a Reno-esque effect. It doesn't tax you in deck building, but it does tax you in the game. But frequently, they'll remove the top 10 cards. The best way to think about it is it's deleting the bottom 10 cards of your deck. That's how you should be looking at this. And frequently, in aggro matchups, you weren't going to see those 10 cards regardless, because if you don't Alpenfestung, you're dead anyway. So it's one of those cards that is, it just kind of invalidates everything the aggro deck has done up until the turn it is played. And it's just a very, very frustrating thing to have in the game, where it's like, oh, I play this 7 credit card and it invalidates the last 6 turns of what we have done, because I am now at 25, you have no board, and I have like several big bombs in hand that seal up the game from here. So yeah, Alpenfestung, glad to see it gone. Hopefully it never comes back.
I am going to take a different position than both of you on this. Alpenfestung is one of my favorite cards in the game. Not at the moment.
Yeah.
So what I love about Alpenfestung is the play experience on both sides of it up until naval warfare came. And what I mean by that is a lot of people actually thought Alpenfestung was bad. Like, a lot of people thought Alpenfestung was unplayable in control because they thought losing the 10 cards was substantially worse than the need to heal. And I think those people were wrong. I was firmly on the side of you run Alpenfestung. But I just want to point out that that argument existed. There was a lot of competitive people who thought Alpenfestung was unplayable before naval warfare. And when Alpenfestung was in a deck, it was always so much fun to play with on either side. Because if you were the aggro deck, when Alpenfestung came out, Germany didn't have the guaranteed value or kill from hand ability to win a game. Just like, oh, I'm fundamentally just going to beat aggro eventually. So if you were an aggro deck, you could actually feasibly try to win in fatigue against German control. I know that concept sounds insane now, but that was like a real possibility. When Alpenfestung came out, you could try to completely rework your game plan, and actually just play the long game, especially based on the tools you saw burned. And that's another really fun part about Alpenfestung is you see the 10 cards. Both players see the 10 cards. So it gives both players an idea of what is left in the deck and what is no longer in the deck. So if you see both Crossfires and Leopold go, the aggro deck now knows, and I guess Capitulation now, the aggro deck knows, oh, I don't have to play around board clears anymore, so I can go as wide as I want for the rest of the game. Or, if they see Comet 2 Blitz Doctrines go, they know, okay, the repeatable value is substantially less, so now I can just focus on trading out everything and trying to limit the amount of damage I take to my HQ, while playing around the board colors that remain in the deck, and stuff like that. So Alpenfestung was just a very, very thin card. It was a risk to play it. It was a risk to put it in your deck. There's a lot of debate on when it to come out. And also, the great thing about Alpenfestung is it's such a tempo loss to play. There's a lot of situations where you'll be at 10 health and your opponent has 15 damage on board and you don't have a board clear. So you play Alpenfestung to avoid dying, but then you're still taking that 15 damage on board and going back to 10 health. And you've effectively just bought yourself one more turn at the cost of 10 cards in your deck. And these are all situations where Alpenfestung is not broken and it's not particularly unfun to play against. But once we enter a meta where all of the other healing in the game is gone, which makes Alpenfestung the best single healing card in the entire game by miles. And then also Germany has the value generation and the burn from hand and the repeatable value to basically close out games, even if they only have even if they lose 2 of their best cards, they're still going to be able to close out a game fairly quickly if you're playing Alpenfestung. And then also they have the best board players in the game, so you can't really go. It's much harder to go wide with Alpenfestung. But really, the point I'm trying to say is I don't think Alpenfestung is the issue, and I absolutely would love Alpenfestung to come back one day. But I also understand why they rotated it, because with the other cards Germany has that they can't rotate, like Crossfire and Capitulation, and now Salamander, although that's a much smaller thing. So with all that being said, I think Alpenfestung, it's seen its time in the sun. I think it's fine to take a break. I hope it comes back in the day because it's a very fun card, very interesting play patterns. Anyways, I've spoken way too much about this guy.
No, that's okay. If anybody, by the way, when I was giving my quick summary of in the current meta, yada yada, wanted the more erudite explanation of what I was trying to say, you just got it. Unsurprisingly, I also would quite happily see this come back, just not now. But that's cool. I think we can all just take a breath and move on. Alpenfestung is leaving for good reason. I don't think it needs to be reworked, changed, or any of that. It just needs to come back at a time when it's not just so oppressive. Speaking of oppressive, it's like I can't help myself. This is Blitz Doctrine, and if I sound impassioned when I am explaining myself in this, do you know what? I'm not sorry. You tuned into this thing. So this is Blitz Doctrine. Blitz Doctrine has had different variants and changes and nerfs, and we're not gonna... We don't have time. Blitz Doctrine is a 2-cost special German order that says develop a German light tank, that is to say a tank that has an attack of 3 or less. Add Contest Doctrine to your hand. Contest Doctrine is a 4-cost order which says develop a German heavy tank, which is bigger tank, yada yada yada, and for the rest of the game, tanks you deploy get +1/+1. I could not possibly have targeted, handpicked, or in any way, shape, or form predicted, wanted, or prayed for a card to leave in the current meta more than this card. This card has single-handedly handed Germany so much generatable value to go into their control and or pseudo mid-range, but we don't really need to be mid-range because we've got ramp and control tools, so fuck you. It's generated so much oppressive bullshit that I have played against. It has constantly been offensive in the sheer value that it can create, the fact that it can give you elite tanks that you don't have to run in your deck. Mouse, yes, I am looking at you. I am so glad for so many reasons to see this card gone. I wasn't a massive fan of it when it landed. Everybody knows I had strong opinions on Develop, but I'll save that rant for another nation because I'll still have more to say on this. But I know JKing in particular is familiar and has chuckled away at some of my rants about Develop. Am I sorry to see this go? No. Frankly, it can't leave fast enough. JKing?
This is a card that I go back and forth between this card should have never been printed and this card being printed and now rotated and hopefully never comes back is good because it was an early lesson that this type of crap should never ever be printed, and it's good that it came out standalone rather than, I mean, it did kind of come out in an expansion all around this stuff, but like, I'm very glad, I hope that if 1939 has learned their lesson with Develop and permanent effects, that there's no other card like Contest Doctrine that ever exists, and Contest Doctrine is the mistake that was made to learn that we shouldn't do this. Then it's fine. But I wish we could have lived in a world where Blitz Doctrine never got printed, because this card is so monumentally stupid. It's functionally like card draw, but it doesn't thin your deck. And also you get to pick situational cards, like you get to pick cards specifically for the situation you are in. Like, if you just want value, you pick like a King Tiger or a Vows, you just pick the biggest thing. If you need like a tempo play, you pick the fight guy, but also maybe you need something that comes out sooner, so you pick one of the 4-cost Blitz dudes. And then you get 2 of them, and then also it gives you permanent buffs for the rest of the game, which then are better the earlier you draw them. And also you can get multiple copies of elites because the pools are relatively small. And then especially with the 1-cost pack that lets you generate 7 attack blitzers off the small tank version of this.
Yep.
This card was horrifically designed. It should have never been printed. And also they did not spend enough time contemplating this card when designing future tanks in the expansions that came out after this. This is one of the few cards that I would have been fine getting rotated early rather than waiting the necessary year and a half. I hate this card. That being said, I actually think that Blitz Doctrine is kind of bait in German-US ramp right now. Because there's just basically no tanks in the deck. And the deck is basically a glorified burn deck. And Blitz Doctrine is just a massive credit sink that doesn't help you with your otherwise burn strategy. So I actually think, in specifically the way German US is built right now with the Bismarck buff and the lack of healing and Salamander Comet combinations, I actually think Blitz Doctrine isn't good in German US. But that being said, it is still an insane card in other decks like Germany, Finland, or US Germany. And you know, it would have been really interesting if they instead printed a card that was something along the lines of, if your starting deck has at least 10 tanks in it, give all of your tanks +1/+1 for the rest of the game. And then make that like a 5-cost order or something. You know,
Yeah.
something that does not develop cards and also requires you to have built your deck in a specific way, but then still requires the credit sink to get the permanent buff. That could be interesting. I'm not against permanent buffs for the rest of the game, but the way Blitz Doctrine works is stupid. But yeah.
Yeah, it's almost as though the ability to it's almost as though the ability to develop situationally tailored tools that may or may not buff themselves out of absolutely nowhere. It is powerful, but okay, I'm gonna try and stop now as well. I'll pass you all on to Core, who I'm sure has passionate opinions, but might be at least vaguely less insane than JKing and I are, because I know JKing and we know each other very well, and we've shared passionate opinions in private and in other places about this card for some time. Core, take us to a possibly slightly less loud place.
Well, I mean, I've been very vocal on this card. This is one of the cards that I was really rallying to be rotated like as soon as it came into the window. This and Baker Street Irregulars were like the two big ones for me. On one hand, the Heinz player in me is like upset because you lose out the late game value tool of Blitz Doctrine. So your Heinz deck now just dies in the mid game if you don't kill your opponent. But on the other hand, God, this card sucked to play against. Like I will stand on the opposite side of the fence to JKing and say that I think this was still like relatively fine in Germany US, primarily because slower mirrors like Germany US mirrors and like control mirrors in general usually come down to who drew their Blitz Doctrines first, and having two Doctrines in the deck means you're more likely to find your Doctrines first. Yeah, just giving a nation that already has the ability to generate massive value, plus the ability to generate tanks from things like Panzer Grenadiers, for example, the ability to not only give their tanks +1/+1 for the rest of the game, but also generate two relevant tanks in the mid game, it turns out is a pretty big mistake. Yeah, again, like I said, this card is a card I have been rallying for to be shot and just removed from the pool, and I'm so glad it finally has been, because I'm tired of playing against Brit main decks and losing to randomly generated Maus or like randomly generated King Tigers for some reason. Yeah, just yeah, this card I'm just
I want to circle back to just throwing out a few more suggestions of like ways this card could have been designed to be less stupid, so that if anyone from 1939 is listening, they get inspiration next time they have an idea like this and want to make it, you know, not awful. So something that they could have done to make it specifically playable, or at least targeted to be played in more aggressive tank decks, is they could have made the what is considered a light tank a 1 to 2 cost tank, and then a heavy tank a 3 to 4 cost tank, and then capped it out at 4. There's still really good 3 and 4 options, like the Panther 3L, the Panther 3E, even the Panther 3J is fine. And then, you know, a control deck would look at that and be like, do I really want to spend that much credits to get like a relatively small tank and relatively few buffs? Whereas like a Heinz deck would be like, absolutely, I want that. And the other thing they could have done is just made this an elite. So one, you can't get the buff twice to get +2/+2 on everything, and then two, not every single deck is German ally with 2 Blitz Doctrines because you need it for the value generation. That was one of the worst experiences ever in just control mirrors. After corporate operations came out, where it's like Soviet German control and Britain German control and German Britain control and US German control, and yeah, it was awful.
I think it's safe.
like circling back to the develop thing, if elites were not in the develop pool, this card would have been a lot, like, it wouldn't have been nearly as like frustrating to play against as it was. But oh god, I mean, just in general, just developing random tanks that are like really good situationally is very frustrating. Like, even just picking Panther Gs in like control mirrors bloody sucked.
To be fair, I have a
Yeah.
feeling we might discuss develop again later. And for the sake of the viewer's sanity, I'll say I think it's safe to assume that we are collectively not sad to say goodbye to Blitz Doctrine.
God no.
So, on to something possibly slightly less impassioning, but still a German card that has some lovers out there. This is Envelop. This is a elite countermeasure. 3 cost, and it says, when a unit moves into the front line, destroy all units there. I will say, this card did bring me one of my best early cards learning experiences. The first time I played into this card and didn't think about countermeasures because I was an idiot, it did remind me that I needed to reset my card brain. There is no denying that this card can be powerful. I don't know that it's been massively relevant recently, because I think it is one of those countermeasures that JKing alluded to earlier, along with things like Ultra, that you are kind of almost, after a certain amount of time at a certain level of play, auto-conditioned into thinking about, as opposed to countermeasures that, frankly, you can miss. A lot of very good players will play around Envelop if you're floating 3, but there's no denying it can still have an impact. Is it the most impactful rotation in Germany right now? Definitely not, but I think we've established that already. Anyone got some Envelop thoughts?
I'm very surprised to see this card rotated for a couple of reasons. One, there's no shortage of German elites they could have rotated, other than this. 2, they recently added the achievement modes, and one of the
Yeah.
hidden achievements is to kill 5 units with Envelop, so it's kind of surprising that they added an achievement for a card that is being rotated. 3, this card was previously rotated and brought back, I think, in covert operations. So like it's spent time out of the game already. It's also like an elite countermeasure, and I think elite countermeasures are more fine because it's like one ofs, and also expensive countermeasures are more fine because it's like more obvious when they're being held up, even if they have a powerful effect. And with Aufklärung being rotated, that we'll talk about in a bit, there's no ways to randomly get them. So like I don't know, my ideal changes would be Jagdbomber for Lurking Danger, and then keep Envelop to combine with the Lurking Danger. I don't know why this is just kind of a somewhat shocking card to see rotated when I don't know, they could have rotated like Hipper, for example, where it's like not the end of the world, but it's just like a good card that's at the edges of a lot of decks, and especially like bringing back U48. It's like, okay, you can have U48, but you take out Hipper from like the Navy burn decks and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just feels like a bit of a wasted space and wasted opportunities.
Yeah, I think there are definitely other targets. Core, any disagreement?
Not particularly. I will say on the topic of like other things they could have like rotated, I would have liked to have seen the researchers gone this rotation list. I think research has had their time in the sun. I think it's fair that they kind of just get rotated in sunset. Envelop was like a fun card. I played around with it a little bit like during Naval Warfare when we had the Japan Soviet deck everywhere, because no one was playing around Envelop. They were all just jamming everything into their front line, so you could just randomly get people, which was funny. But on a like as far as competitive stuff goes on high ladder, no, Envelop wasn't really being run.
Right. So, well, past Envelop, we get to another countermeasure. This is hit the drop point. So I kind of going to try and control my tone on this, but I have a lot to say on this, and not for necessarily all the same reasons. Hit the drop point is a limited German countermeasure. It is 0 cost. We're going to circle back to that in a minute. And it says, when the enemy deploys a unit, suppress it. can affect a covert unit. Right. Before we get into anything else, I am not about to claim that this is a world-breaking card and that it's destructive or yada-ta-yada-ta-yada-ta and any of that. So those of you who are lovers of Hit the Drop Point, take a chill for a second. I have a point to make, and it is quite an impassioned one. If anyone from 1939 is indeed watching this back and is listening to the different things that are being said, like JKing said about different design contexts for Blitz Doctrine, which is a very valid thing, I have been doing this shit for more than 3 decades. I have talked to and worked with some of the smartest people in the various industries. I have played with some of the finest players in some of the most complicated games. I do not consider myself on their level. However, I do also have a design background. Can you please, for the love of all that is holy, never again contemplate, consider, let alone actually print countermeasures that don't have a cost? It defeats the object of the countermeasures game, which is being able to either A, predict your opponent's countermeasure, or B, bluff your opponent with a countermeasure. This never feels good, no matter how it happens, because it doesn't cost anything, which means there's jack that you can do about it, which makes it, regardless of whether it is good or powerful in the meta, a bad piece of card design. And I think I can count on one hand the number of times I have actually said to 1939, either publicly or privately, that something is actually bad card design. This is straight up bad. Please stop with the zero-cost countermeasures. Anyway, someone take over before the old man continues ranting.
I mean, the zero-cost countermeasure thing, I mean, this is... After Hit the Drop Point rotates, we will have exactly 2 left in Standard. I think, like, last rotation, they also got rid of a bunch of zero-cost countermeasures, so I think they are slowly, like, pulling them all out of the format, which is a good thing, and particularly with like the rotation of Aufklärung, which again we'll talk about in a little bit. This is just a good move. I think this is a design space that, given that they like are aggressively rotating the zero cost countermeasures, I think they understand that this is not a design space that should be occupied anymore. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they have learned and they will not be doing this anymore, because we talked about this at length in like during deep cuts, the whole thing with zero cost countermeasures and the fact that it's a binary thing that you have to play around, like they do or they don't have it. Yeah, I'm glad to see this gone, and I'm glad to see Aufklärung gone again. More value that Germany did not need.
Yeah, this like it hit the drop point. I agree with everything you said about zero cost countermeasures. I'm not going to rehash that. In terms of like, are they printing more of them? Hit the drop point's the only zero cost countermeasure that's been printed in the last like 3 years, 4 years. And it's not rotated. They haven't printed one in a year and a half. So it seems, fingers crossed, like they have decided that the zero cost countermeasures are a thing of the past. In terms of like the actual effect of Hit the Drop Point, I think I was going to say the only thing that matters is Aufklärung, but Aufklärung's also getting rotated, so I don't think this has literally any impact whatsoever on the game. But the other thing I'll say is that this card has the covert word on it, which is something that I will circle back to with some of the other nations, but it does seem like they are removing most of the cards that say covert on them outside of most of the covert units themselves.
Yep.
I will say there's like 2 or 3 mechanics that are like getting the start of their sunset now, which is covert, Alpine, and I think countermeasure stuff in general as well is also getting somewhat sunset.
Yeah, I've talked before about the fact that this is something that all games kind of have to do to measure how much is in their game. But yeah, we'll definitely see that going forward. See, I can do calm while this is on the screen, just not initially. Right. Speaking of Alpine, this is Mountain Offensive. I don't think this is going to be a particularly long discussion because I think it's mostly going to go into Alpine is finding its way out the door because it hasn't really been doing anything for a while. Mountain Offensive is a 6-cost German special order, and it says add a random 1-cost, 2-cost, and 3-cost unit with Alpine to your support line. In theory, this is a pop value generator, kind of, sort of, unit generator for Alpine. Definitely when people are playing around with Alpine, they usually try this, in my experience. Quite often they find better things to do, but they usually at least try this. I think it just speaks to the fact that Alpine's being put into the background for a while, maybe to see a rework or a return with some more support, and that's kind of all I've really got to say on it, because I've played with Alpine for a bit. It's not really very good at the minute, and I can sort of see why they're quietly letting it have a break.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Mountain Offensive as just a card, and this is great because Mountain Offensive came out in Winter Warfare, and it got released at 7, and I want to play it at 7, and then a bit before Blood and Iron came out, or not Blood and Iron, Covert Operations came out, they buffed it down to 6 costs, and there was a very brief window where people were playing Mountain Offensive as a like value card in German control and German midrange. Think about that. That was like a month or two before Blitz Doctrine came out at
Yeah.
1 cost.
Yeah.
And
that's
like,
just-
I don't know, in a world where nobody played, like Blitz Doctrine never got released, and like Bergman still came out and was really good. Like maybe people were playing like a high tier 2 German Italy control with like
Yeah.
Bergman's Mountain Offensives for value and like 7th Alpini for guard and heal, and like the world was nice and the game was fun to play. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, and Mountain Offensive is very clearly inferior to Blitz Doctrine for value generation if you're going to spend 6 credits on something. Rotating Alpine, which we'll see more of, is bizarre since they already rotated almost all the Alpine cards and then brought them all back,
yeah.
and now they're rotating them all again.
Yeah, they never seem to quite decide where they want to land on Alpine. It comes, it goes away again. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, it's especially odd because, and this is sort of the same with Develop, where it's like, they're rotating a lot of the Develop cards that came out in Covert Operations. They're clearly not rotating the entire Develop keyword because they had a Develop card in Air Supremacy, and they had an Alpine unit in Naval Supremacy, or Naval Warfare. So it's like, I don't know, if you're gonna like completely kill the keyword like you did with like Mobilize or Pincer, fine, commit to that. And if you're not, then why are you like rotating these cards en masse that you pushed like a year and a half ago? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if this suggests that they're not trying to kill Alpine and they just needed to pick cards to leave, or if this is just kind of poor planning in terms of like what they wanted to axe.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Core, what about you? I mean, I don't know whether I've ever known you be particularly an Alpine believer to start with, but
No, I've always said that Alpine is bad. I mean, it's too slow. It requires you to like constantly have board presence, which is not a guarantee in the current meta. I mean, it's basically just like Jades from Hearthstone in like a weird way, and Jade is a mechanic I never liked in Hearthstone. But like, talking about like the Bergman thing, Bergman has Alpine on it, and like it doesn't care about being an Alpine. It's not an Alpine unit. It's I don't know why I don't know why they printed Alpine on it. Yeah, I think they kind of printed Bergman to see if it moved the needle. Like they're like, hey, let's slap Alpine on this, see if it moves the needle on Alpine, and if Alpine still doesn't do anything, we'll just sunset it. So yeah, it's a weird design choice. I can kind of see why they might have done it, just to be like, hey, if it works, it works. If not, we'll just get rid of it. They've landed on the side of just get rid of it, burn it all down. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not too cut up about losing Alpine. It doesn't really do anything. I tested it a little bit during Naval Warfare with the 1-2-3s and Gebirgsjäger interaction, where you could like trigger the Gebirgsjäger multiple times while things were transforming. which was like pretty fun, but ultimately wasn't good enough to see any real play.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, aside from that, not really too much to say about on Alpine as a whole.
Yeah. I think we might end up glossing over a few of them as I keep an eye on the length of time we're taking on some of this as well. So, jumping to Recuperation. So, this is a 2-cost German order. Standard rarity. Give a unit +2 attack. If it's pinned, remove the pin and instead give it +4 attack. I don't think we need to spend an enormous amount of time on this card. I think this is just a card that makes sense to be filling out space in rotating out standard cards to make space for things that people might play with. It has an idea behind it. It never really did anything, and I get it. They tried it, kind of didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, this came out in the expansion after Forced Surrender got printed. I can't remember if they did anything else with Pin in Covert Missions, but I guess like maybe they just wanted to release a low rarity anti-pin card in case newer players were getting bullied by like Perma Pin for Surrender decks.
Yeah, makes sense. Core, anything to add?
Not really. The anti-pin cards don't really do anything. This and Rally both don't see any play. It's too narrow to ever really see play because pin is not. It's not in enough decks to warrant you playing like dedicating card slots to such a narrow answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's fine. If they ever change pin to be like suppressible, like it was in like Legends, for example, then maybe we'll see like slightly more interesting interactions. But these anti-pin cards just don't do anything as is.
Yeah,
they're removing the ability to play enemy contact on your own unit and then recuperate it for a +4 attack. And on any unit type, you could do that on an artillery. Do that on a swag, it's Fury.
Oh,
dude,
God.
oh, we just missed the best comet, the 8 damage comet with Recuperation.
Oh, God. Before we go down this rabbit hole, okay, so tip of the spear. This is German 4-cost standard order. Destroy target unit with cost 3 or less. Can target covert units. Look, this just goes into covert seeming mostly to be taking a holiday. I don't think really there's any other reasoning behind this, and I'm kind of okay with that. I don't think covert made any massive waves, and it looks like there is a sort of at least a fading of the degree of covert in the game, and I'm not sad. It was an interesting idea that never hugely took off, and this is a very expensive way of countering something that could, in theory, have been necessary to counter.
I don't understand why this card got released as a limited 4-cost unit or a limited 4-cost card, because in Winter Warfare, which again 6 months earlier, they released Pummel, which is a limited 4-cost German order, suppress target enemy unit, then destroy it if it costs 3 or less. And this is like basically a copy of that, but worse. The sole exception of going into recover. Like they could have made this like a 3-cost special destroy unit that costs 3 or less. And then at least it's like different than Pummel because it's like, oh, you don't suppress, but it costs less, and like also it can hit over it, which might be relevant. But like, I don't know. They released a carbon copy of it. They released a worse version of a card that they released 6 months earlier that no one was playing.
Yeah. Seems fair.
Yeah.
It just we're not massively gonna miss you.
I mean, the issue, like the biggest issue with Tip was that it's just so credit inefficient compared to what you're targeting. Like it can only ever destroy 3 costs, and you're spending 4 to do it. If it was like 3, then maybe there was a world where you could potentially like justify running it. It goes credit even as removal, but no, it's just bad rate.
Yeah, it just never happened. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna do something that I don't normally do. I'm going to flash up on the screen. So we've got the 136 Gebirgsjäger. You can pause these and read these cards if you want to, but I think it makes more sense to collectively do these as they're collectively together. And we're clocking on for 3 hours. Yeah. We've got a lot more to go on, and I don't want to drive all of you poor viewers insane. We also have the 139 Gebirgsjäger, the 13 Gebirgsjäger, the 141 Gebirgsjäger. If you think there's a pattern, you're not wrong. And I'll halt there, but that's 4 more Alpine cards that are kind of Alpine staple, theoretically, units that are leaving us. Unless someone kind of wants to correct me, I think we've kind of said our piece on Alpine, and I don't think popping through a whole bunch more cards to rejig what basically boils down to 1939 seemed to have decided Alpine just needs to go away and maybe come back in a new form.
Yeah. I will say the 136 and the 141s are the ones like the bookends there. Those ones are older ones. They're more vanilla in their text. And those were back when Alpine just needed like a certain number of units, and then you just sort of hit critical mass, and there wasn't enough removal or tempo, and suppress wasn't a mechanic yet. Those were good. The ones in the middle, the 139 and the 13th, both came out in Winter Warfare, where they brought back the commando cards and tried to push commandos. And they are more powerful. Like, you can see 1939 did do a good job at making powerful Alpine units. It's just like the game has been power crept so much that like Alpine as a mechanic is just not really going to cut it unless it's completely broken.
Yeah. It was either
like 139 and 140, 139 and 141 were at least like interesting. Like 141 can be big and like untargetable, can be annoying for control decks if it ever sticks. And 139 obviously burn piece very good if you can like stick 139 then like mount an offensive, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yep. Right, so continuing with sort of with the things that we have talked about, but we will get to Aufklärung does rate its own discussion. And I am being a bit more selective as we go through this. If anyone wants to stop me, feel free to do so. But Aufklärung rates its own discussion because this card definitely had an impact. So Aufklärung is the 2-cost, 1-op cost, 3/2 German standard infantry. And it has deployment, develop. Obviously, we're going to talk about develop a lot. A German countermeasure. And yeah, this thing made countermeasures much, much harder to deal with in a way that I personally found unfun. That's just me, but I am not sad to see this card go, just because, one, it's develop, and I don't love develop, but I'm sort of saving that for the US, and two, it's develop countermeasures, which I think is way more powerful than it needs to be.
Yeah, Aufklärung is, I mean, one of the most fun decks that I've played in cards in the last like 3 years was a US-German Yank developed deck with like 4 Aufklärungs, and you'd get the Retribution that gives it destruction returned to your hand, so you can play more Aufklärungs. And it's just a very fun, silly deck. And Aufklärung is a card that is always fun to play, I feel like, because it feels like you have a lot of agency. It feels like you're setting up some interesting things. I feel just like countermeasures inherently, whenever you can trigger one, you feel like kind of good about yourself. Because it's not like you just like kind of threw it out there like a Hearthstone secret. Like you have to pick the turn that you held it up, and then your opponent played into it. Aufklärung is an awful card to play against. And is just kind of bad game design. And I'm very glad it is gone.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm glad to see the back of this card as well. Just your opponent playing this on 2, and then on turn 3, you're like, well, they passed. It could be any number of things. This could be an envelop. It could be from the deep. Could be careless talk. Could be hit the drop point. Could be God knows what this could be. So it takes away a lot of the, well, I have to play around 17 different potential countermeasures that this could be, let alone like not the ones that are even remotely playable in your actual deck.
Yeah.
Because you just take whatever the best option was. So it was very difficult to play around all the things this could develop, and you'd frequently find yourself getting caught out by something really random.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that like variance is gone.
Yeah. It's safe to say we're not missing you. Next up, we've got another card that, I mean, this is the 171 infantry. This is a 5-cost, 1-op cost, 3/7 Blitz Infantry. It is a limited card, and it has +4 attack if this is your only unit, and it just never did anything. I mean, on paper, it sort of looks like it might be somehow potentially able to do something, and then it never really did. I don't know. I put this in my box of kind of cards that just feel sadly irrelevant, which is a pity because it is actually an interesting piece of design.
This is one of the cards that I forgot existed, so I have absolutely nothing to say about it.
Cool.
Yeah, this is like the quintessential, you put this in control, but like, why would you play this when you have 96 infantry?
Yeah.
Like 2-cost 4/4 Blitz. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just wasn't good. Fine, like, it's draft shaft, basically.
Yeah. It's a fair rotation. It might find some play in draft. Okay, so this is the 50 Infantry Regiment. This is the 2-cost, 1-op cost, 3/2 standard infantry. This card becomes veteran when it moves into the front line, and its veteran version is a 4/3 ambush infantry. The most notable thing I can say about this card is that I did get a reputation for being a bit of an arsehole to people when I did an entire end of a new player run to Field Marshal on a Germany-France deck that cheated a bunch of really painful versions of this unit into the front line and just made everyone sad. And that was actually an immensely fun deck to play because it was clunky as all hell, but when it worked, your opponent hated life. But beyond that, this is the little boy that in theory could, but never quite did. Because hypothetically, if you get this in your front line and you have any kind of buff or veteran support, it can be incredibly annoying. But I don't think it ever really was that supported, and now it just feels like it's going on. I sort of hope this comes back at some point with some support for like an ambush deck. And I know JKing has also, because we chatted about it, tried some ambush decks, because at about the same time, the two of us were like, wouldn't it be fun if we could just make ambush into something that worked? And I think JKing went down a Soviet-German or German-Soviet route, and there's some fun to be had, but it never really was that good.
Yeah, I think ambush is consistently the most underrated keyword by top players in cards. Like, I think there's a lot of cards that are sort of statted or costed a certain way because they have ambush on them, and therefore they are very undervalued. I don't think this was really one of them. Like, it's a decent card. Sometimes you see this like on turn 2 in draft and get terrified, but this is not one of the examples of ambush being very underrated. I think this is just a card that's like, if you go first and you got it down on 2 and your opponent's somehow playing a unit-based deck but also doesn't have the front line.
Yeah. There's a lot of if. Core, do you actually have any history with this card? Because I know a lot of newer players actually really don't. They just kind of ignore it. Kind of validly so.
It's not a card I really ever put any thought into, but like in an aggressive deck, it's like 3/2 is like on rate for a 2-drop, and 4 attack with ambush is relevant. We all know how good 0 is, and that's because it's 4 attack with ambush. So yeah. I mean, it's fine, but it's a lot of work to get it to actually do anything.
Yeah. Oh, I did have some fun with that deck though. And from fun to okay, I might get a little bit ranty. Okay, this is Comet. This is, I mean, you probably know, but what the hell, I've done it for every other card we've talked about. This is the German Elite. It is a 6-cost, 0-op cost fighter. It is a 4/2, and it has Blitz, and it has, at the end of your turn, return Comet to your hand. This card has been a really decent German finisher for a very long time. It has been a very potent card that new players have hated for even longer. It has frustrated many people. and it's had its sins. But I have in the past defended the card as being a German tool that filled a very specific role in German decks that were kind of doing some other stuff and board-centric, and then we entered a world in which Blitz Doctrine, capitulation, crossfight, I could go on. We entered a world in which a certain amount of German cards existed, and then we added a few other little tools that allow it to do some very silly things. 1, 2, 3s, I'm looking at you before you got nerfed. And this card just got stupid brackets than it had already been. Am I sorry to see this rotated? No. Do I sort of hope it comes back again one day in a meta where it's less of a pain in the ass? I think I probably sort of do on balance. And I will say it is an iconic card. This card is at least close to as iconic as Sexton with regards to leaving us. This card is associated with Germany a lot, but I think it's had its time, and I think when Salamander came out, it was fairly obvious that they were contemplating rotating this card, and I think it's probably the right choice. Core, I know you have thoughts on this, so I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah, this was like the called shot I made in the air supremacy review video we did. That when we got to Salamander, I was like, this is a surefire sign that they're going to be rotating Comet because they've just printed a much slower and like higher value version of Comet. There's no need to have both of them in the game at the same time. But I will say I am I am sad in some sense because Comet's a damn good card and it's incredibly fun to play with, but it is in other like regards very frustrating. Like frequently in control mirrors, it's a case of if your opponent like reveals the Comet, you can like in a lot of cases scoop it up because you just don't have an out to the Comet. So it does like it can just solo very specific matchups if you don't like have an answer inherently in your deck. But I am sad to see it go because this was the very first monthly reward I got when I started playing cards. After on my 4th day of playing cards, when I hit Field Marshal, I received a golden comet.
Nice.
And it's been in every German deck I've built since. So I am sad to see the back of it. It has been very important to me in my time learning and playing cards. But yeah, with Salamander in the game now, there's no need for Comet. And plus, it means we don't ever have to think about the shifting attack Sally interaction.
So, you guys are like, oh, maybe, it was a good card, but its time has come. Comet is my #1 most hated card in the game that has not been changed to date. I just went back into the Discord because I was curious. I first started talking in the Cards Discord about wanting to rework Comet in January 2023. And I know that my opinions on Comet predate that. So I've probably been for the last 3 years wanting to see this card get changed. I think wanting to see this card get changed predates rotation existing. I wanted this card to just be reworked because it fundamentally creates a game state that is neither healthy nor fun nor particularly easy to design around. Because Comet deals 20% of your starting health for 6 cards, which is significant. Now, there's counterplay to Comet. There's guards, there are countermeasures, and there is healing. Guards, countermeasures, and healing are not universal cards in this game. Like, if this was a game where every single class had access to a fair amount of guards, and every single class to a fair amount of healing, and every single class had access to countermeasures that could stop Comet, I think Comet would be much more fair. But just having Comet be like a singular win condition against certain nations is very, very poor for just the health of the game. And especially having that card being in a nation that already has the best burn and the best removal for guards and for healing out of Comet range, just combines to make it very, very unfun. Where Comet is your singular win condition. Like, there's the number of discard decks that basically didn't run a unit that wasn't a guard or Comet, and it's just all orders. because like you just discard your opponent's stuff, you keep them with a small hand size, and then you win the game over 5 turns with Comet. You don't need to run any big threats. Or like aggro decks, where it's like super hyper aggro with a bunch of 1-drops and 2-drops and some blitzkriegs, and then you're like, well, do I put in an Enigma, or do I just put in Comet? Because like even if I haven't killed them, I might have done like 12 damage by turn 6, and then I just hit them with Comet twice in a row and win the game if they don't have guard. And
No, I
them
mean,
not having guard is not simply a manner of it in hand. It might be like, oh, my opponent is US. They literally just do not have guard. I just guarantee win the game over 2 turns. And also with then adding suppression as a standard made the problem even worse, because then it's like, oh, I need 2 guards on either side of the HQ, and maybe that's not even enough. And then they added shifting attack, which then it's like, oh, then Comet can attack multiple times, and then the shifting attack Sally interaction should not work the way that it does, according to the way they designed their own game. That's a hill I will die on. That is a bug that is not intentional. If it is intentional, they don't understand their own game, but that's a whole other conversation. I absolutely hate Comet, and I am so glad it is dead, and I hope it never comes back without being reworked. And I think this is interesting territory to rework Comet in, because Comet is specifically like an interceptor. Its job in the real world was to take out enemy bombers. And it's almost exclusively used to rush down the enemy HQ, which doesn't really fit thematically. So my suggestion for a rework that I made years and years ago, and obviously there's many ways you could rework it, but one suggestion I had was have Comet with be 4 cost, 4/2, Blitz, ignores guard, can't attack the HQ.
Hmm.
And that way you can get around guard to hit bombers. You can basically just farm bombers around guard for free. You can trade into a very important unit, even just to trade 1-for-1, because at 4 cost, you're much more fine trading it on the first attack for just 4 credits, 4 damage through guard. Not terrible. Plus, there's already existing stops like can't attack, get around can't attack on cards, which could create some interesting combos with Japan. But again, you could rework it in the fact. I hope it never comes back with its current.
I think
I don't care if Capitulation's gone and Alpenfesting's gone and Blitz Doctrine's gone and Crossfire's gone. Germany could have no good cards, and I would not want Comet to come back.
I think you do make a very fair point about cards that limit design space. Comet definitely does fit into that category. It is very definitive, and I think the not guard is a fair one. Just before we move on, I will say one other place that you could look if you wanted to, 1939, is some kind of anti-bomber targeted fight effect. We have the fight keyword in the game now. I do agree, thematically, this card is a big miss, because it doesn't feel at all like Comet, as in historically. But
well, the thing historically with Comet was it could only because it was like a prototype jet aircraft, it only had 5 minutes worth of fuel in it, which is why it returns the hand.
Yeah.
It returns the base for refueling. That's the thing.
I do get that part, but it misses on the anti-bomber thing for me. But we could probably go on for quite a while about Comet. I don't know if anybody will thank us.
Comet, as far as I'm aware, Comet has never been changed. If it was changed, it was changed in closed alpha. I can't think of a more powerful card that has never seen changes. There's been more powerful cards in the game, and they were all changed at various points. But I think Comet is by far the most powerful card that has remained the same since release.
That is very interesting, actually. Certainly considering how powerful it's been over the years. Speaking of kind of big German cards, I guess. This is the King Tiger. I mean, this is the original. Sorry, Mouse. Also the actual, not sorry, Mouse. Big boy of German tanks. This is the 12 cost, 4 op cost, 10/10 heavy armor 2 elite tank that says your support line cannot be targeted by enemy orders or deployment effects. I mean, this thing is definitely an iconic piece of design in the game, if nothing else, because it's the King Tiger, and it is a very, very passion-inducing thing for anyone who cares about Second World War tank history. I have had many conversations with people with opinions on its design and this, and I've seen some very silly suggestions about the fact that if you want to properly deal with King Tiger, it needs a minimum of like heavy armor 5 or something equally ridiculous. But I do think, I mean, am I sad to see it go? Not really, because I've never really done anything with it unless I happen to randomly pick it off Blitz Doctrine. Honestly, that's about it. That's about all I've ever really seen of it, is sometimes you take it off your contest doctrine and it drops as a 12-12, and that's a lot of body.
Yeah,
I mean, the only thing.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
The only thing like I have to say about this is that normally the only thing I would say about this is a nerf to the Blitz Doctrine pool, but that doesn't matter anymore.
That's
Thank
true.
Honestly, it
God.
would probably be a buff to the Blitz Doctrine.
Blitz Doctrine pool.
You say that. I had to play against the Brit main handlock that dumped this on me on turn 12, and I spent 4 turns trying to remove it.
I mean, I'm not going to deny that there are times it can be annoying, but I do sort of agree, actually. If it was out of the pool, the Blitz Doctrine pool would probably be better. But let's not ever think about a better Blitz Doctrine pool.
King Tiger is a card that I actually really, really strongly hated when it came out. And the where it is now doesn't matter. Nobody plays it. It comes off Doctrine sometimes, but it's not one of the more powerful things you can pick. But when it came out, one, Mary Nostrum was a card that was already seeing a ton of play in German-controlled decks. So you play Mary Nostrum on this, which is give a unit +1/+1. Your HQ gains defense equal to the damage this unit deals. So you heal for 11 whenever this attacks, which is pretty good. But also, when this came out, you spend 12 credits on this, and then your opponent plays like Leopold somebody. Or you spend 12 credits on this, and then your opponent plays Monsoon Rod if they're Brit. Or you spend 12 credits on this, and they play it to the last man if they're Japan. Or you play 12 credits on this, and they play like a Panzer or B-17 or Death from Above or whatever if they play in the US. And then you play this for 12 credits, and you're Soviets, and you immediately snap this concede button because there was zero way that Soviet had to remove King Tiger at this point in time. You played King Tiger, and you literally could not lose the game to Soviet. Which is just really, really frustrating game, especially when Africa Core was very popular and people just outright ran King Tiger because there was enough Soviet in the meta that it's like, would I put in a card that's dead in every matchup except for one where it's a free win into like 20% of games? Yeah, I'll play that. But then obviously like Depth of Winter came out and some other cards, and yeah, it's became much less impactful, but there was a very brief period of time where King Tiger quite literally could not be answered by Soviets.
Yeah, we gotta love the trivia. Right, so from King Tiger to the other Aufklärung. So this is Kurmark Aufklärung. I've opened it, you can see it. It fits into the Alpine discussion that we've had, and honestly, we are talking more than enough. I don't think there's anything important to say about this card. Aside from...
I'll say that it's interesting design for countermeasures. Like, I think this is a more interesting way to do a countermeasure, because you can play this, and your opponent's like, they could have any countermeasure in the game active if they run it in their deck or have it in their hand, but also they might just not have anything.
That's true.
Unfortunately, there was never any other synergy between countermeasures and Alpine, so this just seems like a very bizarre card.
Yeah, I will also say, my last note on this is just creepy artwork.
Yeah.
Legitimately. Anyway, moving along, we have the Panzer 4F2, 6 cost, 2 op cost, 5/5 limited German tank that has deployment target unit must retreat. This is another card that was an incredibly good utility card to pick off Blitz Doctrine, because occasionally it could just cripple your opponent's turn and give you a good body on it. I don't think it. I actually have occasionally seen people run this in games where people were trying out guard heavy decks, particularly when Garrison Pin was being tried out. I've seen some Heinz decks throw a copy of this in just to bounce something to get the last hit. But I just think this is a sensible, quiet little rotation that goes along with the fact that the main way it was still seeing play is gone and we're all celebrating. But as usual, space for anyone who wants to add anything.
The theoretical contest doctrine pool is in shambles right now.
Well, unless they've changed it, I believe the contest doctrine pool is based on standard, even when you play it in Civ. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, this actually does make the contest doctrine pool is getting real small.
It's getting
And
thin
it's
if
like
that's the case.
Mouse and the fight guy.
Yeah.
Like you're always guaranteed to see like the Mouse or fight guy, basically.
That's a thing. Enjoy it in classic, guys. Next up, we've got yet another tank. This is the Panzer 4G. It's 5 cost. It's 2 op cost. It's a 5/6 standard tank. Can we just move on? I mean,
Yep, skip it.
Yeah, my Discord picture is this card art, and that's basically all I have to say about it.
Sorry, Panzer 4G, but there you go. The Stug 4. This is a 3 cost, 2 op cost, 3/4 German limited tank that has Fury, deals double damage against tanks. I do know it has seen some play, and I do know it still does occasionally get tech picks, particularly against big-ass Soviet tanks or big-ass Heinz tanks off Blitz Doctrine. We're talking about Blitz Doctrine again. Who knew? But again,
Huge.
It's just
It's a huge W for Blitz Doctrine.
Yeah.
Being played in classic.
Literally only
But, yeah.
Blitz Doctrine versus Control.
It's just enjoy your Blitz Doctrine in classic. Last thing that we're going to see from Germany rotating out, and this was an interesting card when it came out because it looked like they were trying to do something and then it just died basically stillborn, and I kind of get why, and I ranted a bit about it at the time, and I'll save you all the thing at the moment. But this is Sturm-Brigade Rhodos. This is the 7 cost, 1 op cost, 7/7 infantry. It's standard rarity, yes, really, with those stats, but it does have, in your hand, this unit costs 2 less each time your countermeasure triggers. I get what they were trying for. I said this when the card came out, but it was never going to go anywhere because it was just going to be a card that was incredibly annoying when you were a newer player and countermeasures were constantly getting you, and then the 7/7 body beat you to death. But I've never, I have seen this see play. I'm not going to say this card never saw play, but I never rated it, I still don't rate it, and given the choice that's been made with countermeasures, I think it just makes sense to rotate it.
Yeah, this was basically just like a noob stomp card, where if you couldn't play around countermeasures, and then you get this down early, and you're also playing like a lower rarity deck that probably lacks removal, 7/7 infantry can be quite deadly. I saw people, that was a very, very popular deck at low ranks, so you sometimes see it at higher ranks. And like I've seen people who like play down 2 Sturm-Brigade Rhodos against me on like turn 3 and they still lost the game. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I did once get accused of when I was testing the Jerfin countermeasures thing that was going around at the time. I happened to do some of the testing on a field marshal climb, and I actually got accused and admitted that they had a point on stream of seal clubbing, which is kind of what the deck did.
Yeah, I mean the Reddit can rejoice in their to the nerf to the countermeasure deck that they all complain about constantly.
Yeah.
Yep.